All right, so we're going to go now to Sallie Bryan's garden in the Berkeley Hills. So this is Sallie's before photo. And Sallie attended the Bringing Back the Natives garden tour several years ago and was inspired by the tour to transform her garden into a wildlife habitat. Her garden contains many of Doug Tallamy's keystone species, and it has attracted more than 20 species of birds. Sallie owns a garden design business. It's called 4B Garden Design, creating native gardens for California's bees, birds, bugs, and butterflies. If you are interested in having Sallie design and install a wildlife habitat garden for you, you can email me and I will forward you Sallie's contact information. So thank you. Let's see, let's go now to visit Sallie in her garden. Hi, Sallie, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. I love following Laura because Watershed Nursery is my favorite place to shop for flowers, and I do a lot of research on their website, so I feel honored to follow her. So I'm going to switch it so you can see the garden. And I moved here 20 years ago and was very excited to garden in California, and I planted all kinds of exotic plants, and then the drought hit and everything died. I was actually inspired to build a habitat garden because my mother, Miggy Bryan, who is watching, hi Mom, read Douglas Tallamy's book in 2007 called Bringing Nature Home, and she was inspired to plant natives out on her island, Fisher's Island, off of the Connecticut shore. And then after that, my father was involved with the Nature Conservancy on the island, and he and his fellow partners asked Douglas Tallamy to be a consultant for them. So the island has done a lot of restoring the natural environment and bringing back all of the animals. So I was inspired to do the same out here. So I'm going to bring you down to my garden. I am talking about habitat gardens and how I researched it, how I plant it, and how I maintain it. So instead of talking about plants in specific, I will be talking about sort of big picture. But what I've done is labeled all of my plants. And so you'll be able to see which animals need or find that plant especially enticing to them. So you're going to be able to see birds, bees, butterflies, and hummingbirds. And I might interrupt myself to show you one of the keystone plants that Douglas Tallamy has on his list. So, and if you see art in the garden, that like this sculpture over here, I was an art teacher before doing this, and so these are my work and my kids' works. So I'm now in the back garden. I'm going to go a little fast, my apology for that, and show you a sample of one of my labels. So you can see that this California grape is loved by 3 different species. It's actually loved by the 4th being me. When the grapes come in season, I harvest, not all of them, but many of them. We make some really good grape jam. So we share this plant. And before I move on to talk about how my garden incorporates a habitat garden, I'm going to show you my list. So these are keystone plants, and then plants that are great for a habitat garden. So I have many ribes and ceanothus, lots of species of buckwheat. Elderberry, Calscape says elderberry is a very important plant for California gardens. Ocean spray, the aster that Laura was just talking about, Fig Wort, and many different salvias. And there's a scrub jay who is joining me on the tour today. You can hear him. So in a habitat garden, one of the most important things is to have water for your animals. And so I have that in a few different forms. So I have a few of these trays around, and they have rocks and then mud in them. And this is good for the butterflies. Butterflies need actually minerals from the soil and rocks. And so they like the water and then the minerals that that dirt provides. And this is, my scrub jay is going to go get some water from this solar fountain. So the spout actually is water for the hummingbirds come scooping through, and they like to have water that's flowing. And the only bird that goes in this bird bath is that scrub jay who you can hear. The rest of the birds like to be in this upper pond. I have a waterfall that you'll see from below, and it's a shallow upper pond, and I have a stick across it. They bathe in here often, and then when the waterfall is not flowing, birds come and drink from the edge. I'm sorry, bees come and drink from the edge. So 3 different forms of water. I'm going to bring you around to the side garden now and talk about shelter. So what I'm going to show you is that I have quite a bit of bare soil, and you're going to see that as we travel around the garden. And that is left bare like this intentionally because many bees burrow into the soil. I'm going to interrupt myself. This is a sunflower plant. There are 1,000 native bees in California, and several of them only use the sunflower for their food source. So I have several of these sunflowers in my garden. So I also have a bee house that's up here, and I use bees going in and out of that, but honestly, I see quite a few more burrowing into the soil. And I'm going to stop in this area over here. This is an important spot. I have an elderberry. I have a ceanothus. It's an early bloom. And I have monkey flower and buckwheat. So that's an important area for these wildlife. Okay, continuing with shelter. One of the things that I do is I keep my plants pretty compact because it allows for shelter for the animals that live underneath it to be able to hide under there. And so things are planted very close together to accommodate them. And then I have, you can see over in this area, I have some logs, some sticks and twigs and general debris that's lying around. I do that in different parts of the garden because that too is a shelter, and it's also a food source for animals that eat decomposing matter. And then I'm almost down to the bottom. This area, I have several different buckwheat. That is important. So I'm going to show you this one here. And coming down to the bottom, this is a wall, sort of a little mini retaining wall. And there are a lot of critters that live in there behind the rocks. I have quite a few salamanders that live behind this waterfall. The soil is a little bit more moist, and so they are very happy back there. And then this is my lower pond, which is about 5 feet deep. I have Berkeley, local Berkeley fish in there. And then I'm sure I have mosquito larvae, but that becomes a food source for those fish and the dragonflies. Speaking of food, so food is important. And so what I'm thinking about is being able to keep my little ecosystem happy throughout the year. And so the first obvious one are the plants and flowers. And what are they going to do to provide food for the various animals? So what I did in planning it was I made sure that there are things that are in bloom. Let me show you that flower. There it is, all year round. And so I've already been through my first bloom. The ceanothus and the ribes were the first to bloom. And now we're sort of in the second phase of blooming plants. So animals need the nectar and the pollen. And then, of course, as Douglas Tallamy was talking about, there are many plants where the leaves are going to be important for the caterpillars, and then the spiders eat the caterpillars, and so on and so on. This one is a very important plant. This is the ocean spray or cream bush. Everybody loves this plant. It was on Douglas Tallamy's list, and I have several of these plants, and it's just starting to bloom. It's a beautiful white flower. Continuing with food, I don't use mulch. What I do is the plant debris then goes underneath the plants, and that becomes a food source for those critters who will eat that. And then many of my plants have like this thimbleberry. Here are the berries. And so those will be eaten by birds. Many of the blooms will turn into seeds. And so that is also a food source. Here's my sticky monkey flower that's very, very happy here. And I'm going to come back around to my list of animals that are in my habitat. So I have seen all of these animals here. Some live very close by, some actually live in the garden. I have birds of prey who come through. My Cooper's hawks actually will kill the songbirds. My Phoebe gets the little bugs that come in. The egret comes and gets the fish that are in there. The bats come and get the remaining mosquitoes that are flying around, and my dragonflies will get the first mosquitoes during the day. So it's a thriving little backyard. Over here is a goldenrod. So I'm going to show you how some of these leaves are sort of crinkled here. That's because there's a caterpillar. That is what I always used to say when I was a kid. Caterpillar. Waiting, you know, hopefully it won't get eaten by birds, but that's going to be hatching soon. So when I decided to plant my garden and turn it into a habitat garden, I thought about a few different things. So you're going to want to look at your soil and what kind of soil do you have. So Berkeley Hills is known for its clay soil. I have got some fabulous clay in this ground. And so this area here in the back is heavy soil, and it gets part sun. So the water stays in here, and so plants need to be okay with that. This is my ribes sanguineum, and it has one final flower on it. And I just have to say that caterpillars, and she got a mouthful and off she went. So it's true what Douglas Tallamy is saying. And back over here, back to soil. This is my sunny clay area. Gets most sun during the day. And then moving over to this area. This is a rockier area, so the soil drains a lot better. So if you look in the distance, I have a California poppy that's over there, Channel Island poppy, and I have some manzanita. I have a gooseberry. That is my very first bloom, and the hummingbirds like that one. So that's important. And I have a St. Catherine's buckwheat over there, and I do have a fig tree. We have some fruit trees as well. Okay, coming in over here. So I think about soil type, make sure the plants like that soil. I think about sun, how much sun the plant needs. And I think about drainage. So this one is my black sage. This is a very important plant for all four. Look at that. And there are many bees flying around me. I don't know if you guys can see them. This is my narrow leaf milkweed. This is the best kind to have. I think two talks back, she was talking about that. So planting, I do my planting in, the fall and in the winter after it starts raining, so that the plants do well. I won't be doing any more planting now. This is a bladder pod. This is a
Okay, I
great
think we've
plant.
got
It
it,
likes
Nick. Thank you
bright
very
sun.
much.
And it also is important because it is in bloom most of the year. So when many of the other flowers have finished their blooms, this one is still going for the bees that still need to be sustained. And I've got another plant that's over here. Here's another salvia. I have many different kinds of salvia, another ribes, and a verbena that's also in bloom for much of the season. Let's get up nice and close. Okay, maintaining a garden. In my opinion, it's a lot easier to maintain a habitat garden. So one of the things is I allow it to be as natural as possible. So I'm not cleaning it up all the time. It might look a little messy, but having leaves on the ground decomposing is important because they're little critters who are going to eat those leaves, and then maybe some birds are going to eat those little critters. So keeping things as natural as possible is good. I don't head my flowers because I want them to go to seed, because when they go to seed, then they create their berries or their seeds, their fruit. So here's a manzanita that has its fruit ready for the birds to eat it. They won't do that until later in the season. When I do prune, it's very, very late in the year. And I spend a lot of time watching what's happening in my garden. And so the goldenrod was still up, the stalks were dead, and it was very late. I probably should have taken them down, but I didn't. And then a hummingbird came over and grabbed the silk back and forth, then went over to my house, pulled some of the cobweb, some of the webs, spider webs. She was making her nest with the silk from the seeds of the goldenrod. So the habitat, everything is used. And so leaving it as is a great idea. The aster, it's important to cut them back so they grow better the next year. When I finally do cut them back, I will put the dead aster plants right under the aster so that can replenish the soil. This is another buckwheat that I have. Other things that I do, again, I said I had fruit trees, so I leave some of the fruit up on the trees. Let some of the fruit fall down onto the ground. Butterflies love getting the nectar from rotting. Where is it here? There we go. Sorry about that. Getting the nectar from rotting fruit, and so it's important to sort of allow for that. Here's another sunflower. So I had mentioned that there are several native bees that the sunflower is really important for them. So here is one of them. I don't use mulch, so I don't buy any bark mulch or any of that. What I do is I use all of the plant debris that I've collected from my garden, and I put it back in place. The deciduous trees that are around my area, I will use them in the winter and put the dead leaves there for them, and that is my mulch. And then, as I said before, I leave some of the soil open so that the bees can live there. Okay, so this is one of my favorite plants, the California Fig Wort. And I'm going to show you, I know not to get too close, but perhaps you can see this tiny little flower. It's itty bitty. The hummingbirds love it, the butterflies love it, the bees love it. And it's a fabulous plant for all of them. I do cut this back and it regrows. It's basically a weed. And this is why this was one of my mistakes, is that it takes over. And so I'm stepping back so you can see. So I'm actually constantly pulling it out by the roots and trying to shrink it down. I now have a new area for it, but it just keeps coming back. So this is a plant that I bring to my friends' gardens and place there because it is an important one for many animals. Okay, so moving towards my front garden, I'm going to be talking about my front garden, which is very different from my back garden. My apologies for the bumpy ride. And we're coming to this side garden, which is very dry and very shady. And so these are different plants. Here, this is my California.
Sally, got some reception problems in the side yard.
Aha, okay. Let's just go to the front where that will be better. Shady, dry area coming up to the front.
So we'll just stick around for a moment. I'm sure Sally is going to be in her front yard in a sec, and we should be popping back in then to good focus.
I live in an area that has many deer. In fact, this morning I was sitting in my front room and a deer walked on the sidewalk, clippity clop, checked in on my plants to see if they were still available. I actually have them covered with some netting because they are new. So this is a new area. I just planted this silk tassel Garrya elliptica and the deer got it. So I wanted to tell you just a little bit about planting for deer. When the plant is young, like all of these plants are, I have a Hearst Ranch buckbrush and a salvia and another sunflower. When they're young plants and the leaves are new, deer might still eat at them. So I keep them covered for a good year to 2 years. And with this Garrya, I planted it last year. Even though it's in its second year, the young leaves are still appetizing for that animal. So keep things covered during that first time and make sure that you only want to plant deer resistant plants. These all are, but even when they're young, the deer still like them. So the other reason why I wanted to end in the front garden is because this is a very attractive area for birds. And there are a few reasons for that. So I'm going to come over to this area here. What I have is a hedge that is about 8 feet tall, and the birds hide in there until they feel safe and make sure nothing's around. Unfortunately, there are a lot of cats that are out and about, and it's really important to keep cats inside. Smithsonian did a research project to see how many birds were killed per year, and it's 2.4 billion birds a year are killed by cats. So it's so important to do everything we can to protect our birds. My birds do their very best despite the cats, so they hide in this hedge, and I also have a nice tall tree, and I've carved out, this I did intentionally, an understory. And then in that shady area, what I've planted are ribes and cream bush, a toyon, a coffeeberry plant. And so the birds will be way up protected there. They will come down and go onto the ground and get the little seeds and things. And then I have a Manzanita branch, actually it might be a madrone branch, that's right on the side of the bird bath. And so they perch there, look around, make sure it's safe, and then they get their water. They love sitting on top and getting the water, and then they do bathe in there. Once one's taken a bath, they all line up, and the next one wants to take a bath also. Birds are interesting with bird baths. They're pretty particular. So this is one that they like. And it is probably because they can hold on to the edge pretty well. It's not ceramic like the one below that was very slippery. And the trough underneath is just the right depth for them to submerge without feeling like they're drowning. So if you're going to buy a bird bath, think about the size and make sure that it's one the birds will like. And this is another solar bird bath. So this environment works very well for these birds, and all of these plants are good for them. I'll show you a few up close.
Sallie, we have about maybe 1 more minute if you want to think about the last thing you'd like to say.
That is exactly where I am. My timing is perfect. So in conclusion, I have been gardening all my life. I started gardening when I was a little girl with my grandma, and it was so much fun. And as I grew older, it became a hobby, and I really enjoyed watching the plants grow. When I moved out here and planted my California garden, it became a passion. But not until I planted the habitat garden did it become an obsession with me. It was just an incredible experience to go from seeing beautiful plants to watching my garden truly come alive. From the moment that I planted the California habitat garden, there were bugs and bees and butterflies, and it was thriving. So with that obsession, I decided to actually go back to school and get my credentials in garden design. So I'm over at the Merritt College's landscape and horticulture program. It's phenomenal. So if you're interested in taking a class or two or getting credentials, I highly recommend it. And so that is what I've been doing. And I focus on habitat gardens, and it has been really fun to do. And it also, during this, our planet is going through a crisis, and we need to do everything we can to help our little planet survive. And as Douglas Tallamy says, taking care of the little things, the little bugs and bees, is what's going to move our planet into being a more stable ecological situation. So planting one habitat garden at a time, at least I feel like I'm part of the solution. And then the reward is just seeing it come to life. So thank you so much for joining me in my little tour. And I wish you all fun gardening. And I hope you choose some California plants so that you too can be part of the solution.
Okay, Sallie, well, your garden was beautiful. Thank you very much for taking us on a tour.
You're welcome. Thank you for joining.